Across the world, people are shrinking their spaces, but not their stress. The secret? Most tiny homes are just smaller cages. But a microtopia, done right, is not about size. It's about strategy. In a 10-foot room, you can spark more clarity, more calm, more control than in a mansion full of noise. Why? Because true freedom isn't found in square footage. It's found in the spaces you design to serve your soul. In today's video, we step into the Microtopia Minimalism movement, a silent rebellion where purpose shapes every corner and every object earns its place. This isn't about owning less. It's about building a self-sustaining world that protects your energy, eliminates decision fatigue, and aligns your space with your deepest priorities. Stay with me, because by the end, your idea of home might never be the same. Step across the threshold of a true microtopia and notice how the air itself feels more deliberate. With four walls pressed closer than habit expects, your senses register everything in high relief. The faint grain of a wooden shelf, the hush of filtered daylight, the soft resistance of a single chair waiting at perfect right angles. In this compressed terrain, distractions have no corridors to hide. They either belong or they vanish. Neuroscientists call the phenomenon perceptual narrowing. When stimulus shrinks, focus intensifies. A cathedral of empty space may echo with possibilities, but a disciplined box demands decisions. What stays becomes statement. What leaves becomes liberation. This is the essence of cubed consciousness, the first principle of the Microtopia Minimalism movement. By carving life down to a room small enough to map with your fingertips, you grant your mind the gift of immediate feedback. If an object interrupts the flow, you feel it at once, like sand in a well-oiled gear. Within days, decision fatigue fades because every choice plays out on a tabletop stage you can survey at a glance. The result is not claustrophobia but cognitive clarity, a kind of quiet vigilance the Stoics prized. Nothing superfluous, nothing concealed, everything answerable to purpose. People chase productivity hacks and mindfulness apps. The tiny room delivers both as architecture. It is a compass that never stops pointing to what truly matters, reminding you, every time you cross its modest span, that spaciousness is a function of intent, not square footage. Observe the way a beam of morning light settles into the farthest corner of a tiny dwelling. There, in that triangular hush, lies untapped propulsion. Inside a microtopia, every corner becomes a directional cue, nudging the inhabitant either toward action or away from distraction. Anthropologists have noted that in the compact cells of medieval monastics, a single candle or inkpot placed in a corner served as a perpetual summons to purpose. The same physics of attention applies today. An empty corner magnetizes possibility, while a carefully chosen tool, perhaps a journal, a set of sketch pencils, a meditation cushion, acts as a silent conductor, channeling your first steps of the day into focused momentum. Environmental psychologists call this affordance anchoring. The geometry of a room invites certain behaviors and repels others. In large houses, those invitations overlap until they blur. In a microtopia, the message is crystalline. A corner holding nothing becomes a field of rest. A corner holding one meaningful object becomes a launch pad. And because the space is modest, the catalyst is always within reach, abolishing the friction that often snuffs out good intentions. Over time, these tiny propulsion points stitch together a daily choreography that feels almost effortless. Stoic resilience expressed not in grand vows, but in the quiet certainty that every corner has your back. The lens now glides from that illuminated corner to a slim shelf above eye level, setting the stage for our next revelation: how vertical surfaces in Microtopia transform gravity itself into an ally for orderly living. In the narrow sanctuaries of Microtopia, walls are not boundaries. They are blueprints for behavior. Where vast spaces allow clutter to sprawl unchecked across surfaces, verticality imposes a different kind of discipline. It demands intention with elevation. The higher an object is placed, the more reverence it commands. The lower it rests, the more immediate its function. Over centuries, this quiet spatial code has shaped how monks arranged sacred scrolls, how herbalists stored rare tinctures, and how traditional craftsmen positioned their tools. It is not hierarchy for aesthetic's sake. It is vertical intuition, the unspoken intelligence of storing with purpose and seeing with clarity. Within this philosophy, a single elevated shelf becomes more than storage. It becomes a moral compass. What you raise above eye level often reflects long-term values. The book you revere but reread sparingly, the relic passed down generations, the journal that marks turning points. What rests near your hands tells a different story. Your habits, your priorities, your readiness for engagement. This up-down continuum subtly rewires your decision-making. Every reach becomes a reminder. In a microtopia, even gravity is curated. It becomes a silent ally, pulling your focus down to what's actionable, while your gaze lifts occasionally to what's aspirational. No single drawer groans with forgotten miscellany. No cabinet hides indecision. And in that clear vertical rhythm, you rediscover something rare in the modern age, a space that teaches you how to live simply by standing still within it. Now, from the reverent height of that final shelf, the perspective slowly shifts to the threshold of the micro-kitchen, where intention simmers in the most unexpected of places. Step into the compact heart of a microtopia, the kitchen, and you'll notice something quietly radical. The sink isn't just a fixture. It's a theater of rituals. In larger homes, the sink is often invisible beneath heaps of dishes and gadgets, a forgotten tool rather than a central force. But in a microtopian space, where every inch speaks, the sink becomes a stage for intention. The act of washing a single cup, wiping down a clear counter, or boiling water for tea becomes an anchor, resetting the rhythm of the day and grounding the mind in motion. This is the ritual sink theory, the idea that microactions, repeated in the same place and with the same care, crystallize into powerful psychological structure. Historians of early domestic life found that hearths and wells, often the most modest features of a dwelling, were treated with the utmost reverence, precisely because they touched both the physical and the symbolic. The sink, in microtopian terms, is the modern hearth, not because it offers fire, but because it channels flow. Flow of water, flow of time, flow of presence. And by requiring the user to engage with basic acts, rinsing, preparing, cleaning, it restores the balance so often lost in speed-driven lives. Here, mindfulness doesn't come from meditation apps or productivity systems. It comes from your hands submerged in warm water, from noticing the grain of a bowl, from knowing there's only one dish and it's yours to care for. In a world flooded with noise, Microtopia offers a quieter wisdom, that sanctity is not something you build, it's something you notice again and again in the smallest places. And from this intimate altar of daily rituals, we now move outward to the threshold of sound itself, where silence is no longer absence, but architecture. In a microtopia, space is not just what you see, it's what you hear, or rather, what you don't. Without cavernous rooms to echo through or electronics buzzing from every angle, silence becomes a texture, not an emptiness. This is the realm of sonic architecture, where the absence of noise is as carefully designed as the furniture itself. In traditional desert dwellings and mountain monasteries, builders intuitively shaped space to temper sound. Curved alcoves softened voices, thick walls muted the wind, and silence became a structural virtue. Microtopia revives this ancient instinct, not with technology, but with restraint. When your life is housed in fewer square meters, you become acutely attuned to micro-noises. The sigh of a window draft, the click of a kettle, the sound of your own breath. And that awareness, subtle as it is, begins to restore what modern living has worn thin, your sensory sovereignty. You no longer accept the background hum of distraction as inevitable. You begin to curate silence as a usable resource. A soft rug isn't just a design choice, it's a sound absorber. A wooden stool becomes a grounding point in a room tuned for stillness. This curated acoustic stillness does something rare and essential. It gives your thoughts room to complete themselves. In the hush of a microtopian space, there is less interruption, less self-fragmentation. The mind, no longer under siege by background chaos, begins to thread its ideas more cleanly. Clarity returns not as a goal, but as a side effect of better sound design. From this sanctuary of quiet, we now turn to what often goes unseen: the role of scarcity in reshaping not just your environment, but your identity itself. In the restrained geometry of a microtopia, scarcity is not a constraint, it's a code. A silent architect that reshapes behavior, sharpens priorities, and reprograms identity with each deliberate omission. When you remove the extras, the third towel, the backup charger, the drawer of just in case, you're not just freeing space. You're recalibrating your mind's entire relationship with possession, and in doing so, you begin the process of scarcity encoding. This principle draws on a fascinating truth observed in both neuroscience and anthropology. Environments of limited resource often produce cultures of heightened discernment. Think of how nomadic tribes, with minimal cargo, became masters of multi-use design, or how wartime households developed ingenious systems of reuse. In Microtopia, this ancient intelligence is reborn not out of necessity, but by design. With fewer objects at your disposal, your interactions with them deepen. A single pen becomes a partner. A coat becomes a ritual. A meal becomes an event. You begin to imprint meaning onto the few things you choose to keep, and in return, they begin to reflect you back, clearer, simpler, more intact. This encoding doesn't stop with objects. It seeps into how you speak, move, plan, and even dream. Your gestures become more precise. Your words, more intentional. There's no room to perform excess in a space that sees through it. Over time, the scarcity you once feared reveals itself not as absence, but as authorship. You're not deprived, you're defined. Not by what you lack, but by what you no longer require. And from this coded minimalism, this architectural DNA of discipline, we step now to the final threshold, the invisible boundary where the world ends and the microtopia begins. A zone that protects not only your space, but your sovereignty. There is a moment, quiet, often unnoticed, that happens just as you enter a microtopian space. It's the act of crossing a threshold, not a doorway in the ordinary sense, but a psychological veil. This is the domain of the boundary ritual, the final, most powerful design element of the Microtopia Minimalism movement. It's not something you buy or build. It's something you repeat until the space itself learns to respond. In traditional Japanese homes, a genkan, an unassuming entryway, was not merely for removing shoes. It was a symbolic cleansing of the outer world. Dust, distraction, status, all were left behind. In similar ways, ancient Nordic cabins, desert yurts, and even mountain hermitages maintained transition zones: a firewood bench, a coat peg, a stone path. Microtopias adopt this ancient wisdom with fresh intent. A single hook by the door, a mat that signals silence, a light that shifts in tone. These are not decorations. They are cues to recalibrate your nervous system, to shift from reacting to curating. Inside such a space, rituals replace rules. You might light a candle each time you return. Fold a blanket just so. Place your phone in a drawer without a name. Over time, your brain comes to expect that here, within these few sacred square meters, you are not performer, consumer, or competitor. You are simply the curator of your own stillness. This is what makes Microtopia not just a place, but a practice. A boundary that protects you not from people, but from performance. Not from the world, but from the noise it leaves behind on your skin. And when that ritual becomes muscle memory, something remarkable happens. You no longer search for peace. You arrive into it. Now, we draw our thoughts together, through the closing walls, the rising silence, the singular light. The final reflection is not about space, but about self. So here we are, surrounded not by grandeur, but by intention. We've traveled through the geometry of choice, the acoustics of clarity, the rituals of silence and scarcity, and the invisible lines that separate chaos from calm. What you've seen isn't a trend. It's not decor. It's not about owning a tiny home. It's about understanding a radical truth, that the smaller your space, the more deeply it must speak your language. A microtopia doesn't just hold your things. It reflects your identity, sharpens your habits, and trains your focus in ways vast spaces never will. In a world that shouts for more, Microtopia whispers, enough is a decision. And once that decision is made, truly made, what follows is peace. Not the peace that arrives when everything is perfect, but the kind that grows in rooms where only the essential remains. If this exploration stirred something in you, an urge to rethink not just your space, but the way you occupy your life, don't stop here. This channel is your companion through the philosophy and practice of intentional living. Subscribe if you haven't, because each video is a doorway into more clarity, more calm, and more you. And if you're ready to begin building your own microtopia, start small. One corner, one object, one ritual. That's all it takes. Now tell me in the comments, what's one thing you'd remove right now to reclaim your space? And until next time, may your walls be wise, your silence deep, and your purpose loud.